The next episode is about mental health. I think it is important to clarify this because I know that these issues can be triggers. If you are reading with this, the description box contains lines and web support. He is not alone. Hello, how are you? And welcome to the second episode of Conversations with the Reflection. Today I am super happy. Very excited. Why? Although some of you do not know this or have not realized it. At the time I recorded the first episode, one still hadn't decided on a name for this podcast. I still recorded, without a name, because I knew I wanted to talk about all these topics. But today for this second episode we have a name, so it makes me very happy. Welcome to the second episode of Conversations with the Reflection. I tell you that today's episode makes me a little nervous because for the first time I am going to be talking about anxiety, which is a topic that is quite close to me. I feel like I mentioned it like that with tiny little steps there. I have never talked to him about my experience of what it has been like to live with anxiety. But I wanted to share a little bit about what my journey has been throughout this roller coaster that has been learning to live with anxiety. And well, I want to start with a piece of information. I know that we are not talking about scientific things here, but I wanted to start with a fact because I feel that sometimes that is how we see the most difficult things. If we put things in context better when we have a figure. By 2017, according to studies from the University of Oxford, 792 million people have lived with a mental health disorder. This is approximately 10% of the world. And 2017, a long time ago, is data that is not updated. Perhaps today there are more of us. 10% are 1 in every 10 people. I mean, think about every time you're maybe in a room with 10 people or you go to a party, a meeting with 10 people, one of those people is struggling with mental health, maybe more. If we get technical, don't think that the rest of the podcast is going to be like that, but if we get technical, they wanted to start with this. Let's take a little context and understand that mental health issues are not a minority issue, they are big issues that affect a lot of people. And yet, I feel that even though it has been increasingly fashionable to talk about mental health, I feel that there are certain things that are not talked about enough, and that is why. Well, I'm here because you already know that I have more than so many opinions. I know that it is fashionable to talk about mental health. We have seen it on all social networks and are listening to a podcast like this. Probably you more than anyone know that mental health is a trending topic lately. We could say it like that, but we still invent that I inodulate the head, if one day we had a panic attack and that's why we couldn't go to class. And even in many cases, because at least it has been my experience, it is not understood that living with anxiety or experiencing anxiety is not the same as being very stressed. Today I am going to be talking about anxiety. Later, I am going to talk about other mental health issues, but today I wanted to make a special focus because basically this is what I know best because it is what I have experienced. And as you know, I am not a health expert and therefore, I speak purely from my experience. That's why I think talking about these issues is important. To eliminate a little bit of the taboo, to generate the next day, to generate debate, so that it doesn't become hyperbolic, held, and no, hey, I'm going to listen to you, what do you need? To call a spade, he is asked to stop being afraid of him as if he were a bowl of death flying around. And because even if you don't experience anxiety, if you who are listening to me don't experience anxiety, it is important to know what it is to empathize with the people around you, because I am 100% sure that if it mattered how many people you know someone who struggles with anxiety, knowing or not knowing. So, I wanted to start with the first thing, so as not to be here flying and talking anxiety, but okay? What is anxiety? As I tell you, I don't do it from the experience of a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but from my own experiences. I'm going to talk here a little bit about what anxiety feels like. I like to talk to my psychologist and tell her that when I experiment it feels a little like when you were about to present a final exam and you feel like those nerves are coiled in your stomach, like a lot of things there that are squeezing, a nerve that was in your stomach, as if in your throat, but you don't have a final exam. And I can't find any apparent reason why you should be feeling this way, but you have that kind of nerves and that slightly short breathing. Sometimes anxiety feels like not being able to sleep, for example, because all of a sudden, every existential crisis you can think of in your life is about agreeing to meet you at night. Other times anxiety was in my case when I began to identify that it was cold with anxiety, but it is not the most common case in general in my life. It was like that's when I realized, Valeria, there's a problem here. Because that is anxiety, it feels very sublime and uncomfortable, but if you learn to get used to it, sometimes you don't even realize that being like that, worried, having that fear, sometimes you don't realize that that is not normal. But in my case, the anxiety manifested itself a little more when I left Venezuela. As you know, or if you don't know, I am from Venezuela and I lived there for the first 18 years of my life. When I came here to Madrid to study and I left Venezuela, I came alone, and my family, my mother and my father and my brother, stayed in Venezuela because my mother did not know how to go to school and my parents worked for her. And I already came to study in Madrid. Clearly there is a time change between Spain and Venezuela, 5 hours difference depending on the time of year. And I remember that I woke up very early at that time because I had classes early. I woke up distraught. Firstly, because I didn't have to say good morning, and secondly, because I couldn't write to the people I used to say good morning to at that moment, because it was clearly night in Venezuela and they were going to be sleeping there. And this caused me terrible anxiety because it made me think of all the thousands of possible, fatalistic, extreme scenarios, and I thought that instead of them not responding to me because they were asleep, they were not responding to me because something had happened to them. They did not respond to me because something had not happened, and therefore they could not respond to me. And I know that if you say it out loud, you say, okay? But obviously not. You don't have any type of logical evidence, there is no rational way in which you can reach that conclusion, because the normal thing is that they are sleeping, and if you don't have news otherwise, why would it be different? But I had those fatalistic scenarios, like I was reluctant to happen something terrible. That was anxiety. And that was one of the main reasons why I started going to the psychologist, although I had already been going before, but it was related to the same theme of going out on my own, being alone and not having control of what my family was basically experiencing. But in reality, beyond my own experience, the common term for anxiety is like worry, feeling worried because you think something is going to happen, because you think something may happen that is not within your control. And the most likely thing is that that thing that you were so worried about could happen, that sometimes you are not even specific, that bad thing that could happen, the most likely thing is that you do not have reasonable evidence to say, okay, that is obviously the most likely thing that will happen. And I'm not saying this as if there is no invented anxiety, this is all in your head. Anxiety is very real, a lot of people experience it, and it's not about inventing things in your head and worrying about the stories that you made up. It's something that's going to be a little bit beyond you. But I wanted to tell you this because maybe you are going through anxiety right now, or you know someone who experiences it if you have never been able to understand it. But worry is such, because worrying is not synonymous with anxiety, just like being stressed is not synonymous with anxiety. When I was 11 years old, I started suffering from stress alopecia, or that's what they told me it was called. Basically, for those who don't know about alopecia, in my case it manifested itself as the hair on my arm falling out and looking like holes, and it wasn't normal. I know that nowadays we shave, we affect ourselves, we remove our body hair, but it is not normal that at 11 years old your hair alone falls out in some armholes. And therefore, my family decided to take me to the dermatologist, and then the dermatologist recommended that they take me to the psychologist because the same thing had happened to their daughter, and it was due to stress. That was the first time I went to the psychologist, and after several sessions, I don't remember exactly how long, for small children, time passes very slowly, and, according to me, there were several sessions, maybe there weren't that many, because nowadays time passes faster. But I had a few sessions, and after that I was cured. He taught me to organize myself. This psychologist, the biggest of my concerns at that time, was academics. I worried a lot about my grades. After this my alopecia was cured. But I would say that that was not a specific issue, it was not like there is, your alopecia would be worth it. I'm not going to put me here to explain my entire health history or anything like that, but several things happened that gave me some indications that what I was experiencing was not merely a specific case of stress alopecia. What was definitive in the moment I realized that this was anxiety, is that clearly as I grew older, I began to hear about all these mental health things. I was 17, 18 years old, in the year I was going to move, 2019, when I fell in love with Spain. In Madrid I had already decided that I was going to study here, I had already entered the university, I was traveling, I was looking for a place to live, etc. And I was about to like school. And at that time, I started having a series of panic attacks about the whole issue of going to the country, something out of my control, separation anxiety, etc. And from there, 3 years ago, 2019, I started going to my psychologist with whom. And I still have dreams. At first I started having sessions once a week and now I see her every 15 days. And I am better and have learned to regulate anxiety, and for those who have anxiety, believe me, if things improve and there are tools to help you. But this is not the point of the podcast. It is not to talk just about me. It's putting a little bit of context into crying for people who don't feel so alone. Because I know that sometimes anxiety feels like someone who no one cares about, I worry about, there's something wrong with me. I think the thing with anxiety is that sometimes it makes it feel like when you say it out loud and say I'm worried about this thing, I'm anxious about this thing, it's not going to make sense. It has happened to me. How it happens to me at this moment that I told you, is that I was afraid that, if it went to me, they would not respond to me, because they are sleeping, because a catastrophic event had happened and I can't help you if that doesn't make sense. I say it out loud and say, okay, that doesn't make sense. And I think this is the thing with anxiety sometimes that makes you feel like if you say it out loud and you tell it to someone else, the immediate response is going to be, but there's nothing to worry about, it doesn't make sense. And this is like the most frustrating thing, because deep down you know that, if there are no tangible reasons that point to Asia, that something terrible is going to happen because I would have to worry about something terrible, but at the same time you feel like you can't stop worrying. Because of course, they are fatalistic and rational thoughts. Very unlikely, but if this is so, there is no probability either. Why does it feel so real? I think it's like my question. Main, yes. If you assume that it is irrational, if you assume that they are intrusive thoughts, if you assume that the chances of them happening are minimal. Why does it feel so real? That concern. I wrote it down here. I want to read it so that the thread of what I want to say is not lost. Intrusive thoughts may be just thoughts. They are not facts. And nothing bad may happen in the material world. But without a doubt, those thoughts are there and they affect the way you are living your life, because whether you want it or not, it affects the way you develop, and sometimes it affects the decisions you make and how you handle things. Why do I tell you this? So that they know that no, they are not crazy, that having anxiety is not being crazy. It's not that you make things up and worry because you made up 1,001 stories. They didn't invent anxiety. If you are seeing and going through this mental health condition, you did not invent this anxiety and it is not your fault. But what we do, whether we like it or not, although not whether it is our fault, we will have been born with anxiety or have developed the path, although it is not our fault if it is our responsibility to deal with it. If it is the responsibility of each one of us to take responsibility and say, okay, this is not the way I want to live and here I go with what has helped me. Because I know. It's not easy. I know that it is not a black and white or a do or do not do this for my life, I want or do not want to change. I know it's not about that. It is not a band-aid that you put the band-aid on the wound and that's it. He was cured. No. It doesn't work like that. I know it. I know he has his super melted. We are not going to simplify. But I wanted to share some of the things that have helped me because I feel like they are good tools so that if you are going through this or even if you know someone who was going through this, you can try some of these types of things. This 100% from my personal experience is not professional recommendation. I want to clarify, and each person is different. So different things can work for different people. But here is a little of what has worked for me. The first thing, and I think you are already expecting it, the first thing I am going to recommend and the first thing that has helped me, which is like the basis from which I have built the rest of the things, is to go to the psychologist. The first thing was to admit to myself. Before going to the psychologist, the first step, the foundation, the seed was to admit to myself that I didn't want to continue living like this. You have to understand that I also had a moment of peak anxiety where my anxiety got worse because I was going to leave the country, which generated more than usual. And at that moment I made the decision of okay, I don't want to live like this, I'm going to go to a new country, I'm going to have to do several things and I don't want to have to deal with all this weight alone and ask for help. I know that asking for help and admitting that you need help is not easy. I understand that sometimes it is difficult to say out loud that this is heavy and I don't want to carry it alone. It's not that I can't carry myself. Maybe yes. But I don't want my back to hurt as much and I want to distribute bad weight a little more like other people. Peer help doesn't make you weak. Admitting that you need help does not make you a weak person, it does not make you incapable, it does not make you less of a person. Pira help makes you human. Pira help seems to me to be one of the most beautiful acts. One of self-love, to know that you do not want to put all that weight on your shoulders alone because there are people who can help you, and asking for help is also an act of humility to recognize or that look, I don't have to do all this alone. So that on the one hand I understand that it is not easy to admit that you need help, but this was the first step for me, and thank God and thanks to the opportunities in my family I had access to a psychologist immediately, and you can find a psychologist. I say this because I know that it is a privilege unfortunately within society to have access to a psychologist, because there is still a lot of work to be done in the field of public health. A lot of work is needed in the field of mental health. To understand that all people would see having direct access to mental health, because all people have in some way some battle with mental health at some point in your days. But well, right now I'm not going to talk about the value of reform, but I do think that there are still many changes to be made, and I know and recognize that mental health today is a privilege to have access to a psychologist. But well, this was my first step, and the truth is that if you have the possibility, I recommend going to a psychologist. It seems to me to be one of the best investments in life, and I continue with the line of admitting that you need help. You have to do everything in life on your own, you have to deal with everything on your own. Understand that you can live better, that there are people who can give you tools to manage your problems in a better way. Understand that life can flow more, that you can find tools to deal with your thoughts and be more aware of them. Remember that not all psychologists are for all people, nor all people for all psychologists. I tell you this because I know that there are people who sometimes don't click as a psychologist and think that the psychologist is not for you. Don't think that once the psychologist didn't it work then, but never with any other psychologist in your life. It can work for you, but let's go with the following, because here, for what it's worth, promoting psychologists, let's go with the next point that has nothing to do with psychologists. One of the greatest things that has helped me is to awaken awareness, not the awareness of good and evil, of distinguishing what is good and what is bad, which is also very important, but the awareness of awakening a little bit of that awareness, that attention of knowing and being aware of what is happening inside your head, how to monitor. Let's see what I'm thinking today, let's go. To take a pause and see what my next thought will be. I know that at first it is not the most natural, it is not the most intuitive, in the certain way that it does not normally occur to us to be monitoring what is happening in our head. Our head is going through what is happening and it makes us continue with our day, and we go to classes and go out with friends and so on. Your thoughts are valid, that is, they exist. That you have those thoughts, there is because you have them. And another thing is that all your thoughts are true, which is a lie. That is, not all your thoughts are true, they are valid, they exist, they are there. But it does not mean that they are all true. The truth is a different thing. For me, an example that once heard in a meditation that said that thoughts were like leaves on a tree helped me a lot. Here we start with the cliches, but you already know me, you know what I am. So the thoughts are a little like leaves on a tree, and you are the tree, and the leaves arise, the leaves fall, they go away, and new leaves come out again, and then they fall down and they bathe like this clickily, and there is a moment in which you realize that your thoughts are like the leaves on the trees. You are the tree, your thoughts arise, and suddenly the leaf falls, the thought leaves, and it no longer comes back, and another day another leaf arises, and perhaps another day another thought arises, and you worry or in a thought and say you have to be overwhelmed by anxiety, but the thought is arise, the thought I receive arises, and not because it arises it means that it is the tree, because the leaf is not the tree. The tree is something much bigger than the thought. The leaf is not the tree, it is not a whole, it is just a small part, and the leaf at some point falls, leaves, and does not return. And I say this so that you understand the emotion of the intrusive thought to that sensation as a kind of guest. I like to think that the brain is like a little house, right? Imagine that it is your house, your little house, and suddenly someone wants to enter this house and knocks on the door and knocks on the door and knocks on the door, and you say, I refuse because I know that what Troslis contributes is sadness, and I don't want him to come in, and I don't want him to come in. Imagine that the one who is knocking on the door is a thought that tells you it's going to be very bad for you with your friends, and you say no, I don't want that thought to come in, that thought can't come in. Here in that thought there doesn't go away knocking on the door and saying, it's going to be bad for you, you the kuches touching the contribute, you refuse to let it come in, and you start to battle with it. Through the door we imagine the door in the middle, and on one side this intrusive thought, and on the other side there is you, and you on the other side are saying that you are not going to enter, and obviously it is a lie. Obviously I continue to have friends and it's going to be good for me, and I don't know what. And the other thought knocks and knocks and knocks on the door. What's going on here? I have noticed this resistance. This is going to increase with our intrusive thoughts. It's what makes them persist, keep knocking on the door and stay there. It's what you make them be, until one day you open the door. You let them pass like all other thoughts. You grab, thought, drink water, a glass of water inside your little house, and it goes and it went and it didn't come back. Or maybe it comes back another day, but as easily as it came it is gone. What's going on here? Valeria is simplifying things. Things are not like that. In my experience, I have realized that a thought grows when you pay attention to it. What if suddenly a thought arises and a thought arises? Thought from there you will fall. I don't know, I have a glass of water here and you're going to drop the glass of water. That thought arises and you don't get hooked on it, and it doesn't make you argue with the one that I haven't thought of. Because thought does not grow as easily as thought arises and goes away. Why can't we control what thought does not arise? But we can control which ones we decide to stay hooked on and which ones we decide to sit down and argue with for a while and say no, 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 and the thought is yes, yes, yes. And I know that it sounds comical, and I know that it is not, that it is complicated. But I have realized that thoughts can turn into a snowball. Then, a negative thought arises and you think of something else more negative and another thing more negative and bail, until a snowflake turned into a snowball. Why did you get hooked on him? Why did you argue it? Why are you able to argue with your thoughts and add victims, negative thoughts to? Oh, you're going to fall if a friend does because this person doesn't love me and this one doesn't fit me, such, and snowball. But what happens? 100 times, I said that when an inclusive thought arises, you have a good time with it, as easily as that negative thought occurs, and you let it go and continue with your day. I know that it is easier said than done, and that is why awareness and mindfulness and these things are things that are practiced. It's not from one day to the next, I understand that. But what if it's sudden? You try every day to raise awareness a little more, and every day try, well, this thought came to me, I can let it go. I don't have to get hooked on him, he's a leaf on the tree. He is a guest, and until I let him go he goes in and out of the house, and I open the door for him and let him go in and out, and he's not going to stop knocking on my door and tormenting me. This is the simplest way I can think of to explain it. Beyond awareness, which is super important, I am going to talk about the importance of breathing and meditating. And it's worth it how important it is to breathe. I already know that I have to breathe to be alive. But let's go beyond that. They would be surprised, maybe or maybe, not, because maybe they already know. The impact that breathing has on how we feel calm, distressed, etc. There is a method that I want to practice like you, and you can do it later whenever you like. Which is 4, 4, 4, 4. For seconds I inhale, for seconds I hold my breath, for seconds I exhale, and they don't know how to calm that down. But I realize that maybe 4 is not for me, because it is very little time. So what I do is inhale for 4 seconds, I hold it, a long time, not a long time. 6 seconds, 5 seconds, more or less there. And vote, as long as I can, 8 seconds. So let's do this, roughly 4, 5 and 8, right? Let's inhale, endure, and vote. They do this 4 times, 5 times, the time they need it. They continue and they don't know how it helps regulate breathing to calm anxiety. It is one of the things that helps me the most in moments of crisis, breathing at a slow and calm pace and changing the natural rhythm in which you breathe, because normally you obviously don't breathe like that. But this helps me a lot to regulate anxiety. It is one of my gochimaquins, so to speak. And you think you leave them here. But in addition to breathing, one of the things that has helped me the most is meditating. And I know that meditating sounds a lot and is also very stressful, but meditating is not. I thought at the beginning that meditating was having a blank mind. Meditating is not having a blank mind. There is no need for there to be nothing here in the mind. There are no thoughts. I don't think for about 10 minutes and the mind remains blank and at peace. No. That's not what meditating is about. To meditate is to witness thoughts. Let the thoughts be what they are, observe them, do not classify them as good or bad, simply observe them, see them, witness the thoughts. If I tell you, for example, right now, pay attention for a while to what your next thought is. What do you do right now? Pay attention. Just pay attention, for a while, and while you are sitting here or standing or I don't know where you are, walking. Pay attention, what is your production by thought? 3, 2, 1, which one is it? When do you do this? What did you think about? I have realized, this is an exercise that appears in the book on the power of the hour. In the book of Power of the Hour tells you this, as long as you sit for a while, what have you sat for 10 minutes and start closing the hay, okay? I wonder what my next thought will be, and you just sit there, yeah, sitting there. And, suddenly, you witness it. Normally, you don't do this. I know she's a meteorologist and I don't know if I'm explaining myself exactly in words, but no, let there be a lot of thoughts fluttering, that if there is the Rozhev, that if there is a Netflix series, that if the book that I am reading, they are fluttering together, all the thoughts therein, one does not pay attention to it, but if you calm down for a second, 5 minutes, and you stay witnessing. I wonder what my next thought will be, and you just sit there. And, suddenly, a thought comes to you and you observe it. I know that you may and have never done this exercise, it may seem like it, but if you have ever done it and have meditated, it is quite surprising to realize that you are the observer, that you are not your thoughts, you are something bigger than all of that, you are the tree. Another thing that has helped me is having hobbies. Here we go. There is a hobby, okay? Not everyone is supposed to have hobbies, to have a special hobby. First most highly recommended hobby by Valerie and by professionals. It's the exercise. You have to save, that would be fine. It's exercise. Nobody wants that. Why is he telling you that, okay? Well, I tell you that the exercise has been proven. My psychologist gave this to me, I didn't make it up. And it has been proven that it is one of the best antidepressants, anti-stress, and anxiety medications that exist, because, chemically, a lot of hormones are released, but a lot of things are released that help you better regulate certain mechanisms, that help you relax. For me, I see exercise now, not as I want to change my body, I want this, I want that. I see exercise, more than any other physical thing, I see it as my therapy session. An extra therapy session a week, and I love it, and I exercise sometimes, it makes me lazy and sometimes, it annoys me, but it doesn't have to be bad. Find a way to move, it's been fun for you. Well, sometimes one day I don't know, I don't feel like exercising and layering, I don't feel like carrying weights and such, I don't know what, but I put on some music and start dancing. I start dancing, I tutu you, and I start dancing, and I jump, and I sing and everything, and I moved for a while, and how does that help you? And I'm going to make it a habit, that is, a regular Jovi. It's not that there is exercise once and you're cured, no. Doing this, something constant in your life, has helped me a lot, to manage my thoughts, and to relax, to release stress. Another of my Jovi recommendations could be music. In my case, here I don't have a piano, but almost every time I have a piano and I love it, and I'm not an expert at the piano, but I play there, I piano and I relax, and it's a good way to focus on the moment and not be like, go with my thoughts, but for a moment I focus on something fully. Another thing that helps me a lot, but you don't know what helps me, I think that before being a psychologist, before exercise, my most go-to, before being aware that I am the tree and thoughts are the leaves, before all this, I think that what I do most directly when she is very distressed, when I have to see, is to give a hot shower. You don't know what medicine a hot shower is for me. I love hot showers, I put essential thirst quenchers in them sometimes. No, I get in that shower and I don't care if I had already bathed before, I get in and that relaxes me in a way that you have no idea, it helps me a lot. With anxiety, I know how capable he is, there, okay, he was super, right? But really, I'm telling you things that help me. Another thing I can recommend here, with anxiety, is to make a list to find out what are the things that normally help you. I make a list and I start to think about what things make me forget a little about my worries, what things make me distance myself a little from all the thoughts that worry me from the interesting thoughts, what things make me focus fully in that moment and in a group, and make a list, and that when I have anxiety, I look for some activity on that list. If you don't know what these things are, give yourself 10 minutes to think about it. Another of the things that help me a lot are the cool downs. I know that this is strange, I love tea, but not only because of the taste of tea, because of the mood, but I believe that there is something with hot things, hot shower, hot tea that helps me calm anxiety. I don't know what the physical or scientific effect of this is, but I know for a fact that it helps me a lot when I'm in the mood for an exam. I don't know what. Hot tea helps me study more calmly. Another thing that doesn't here is writing. One day I will tell you how I came to this whole topic of self-love, personal growth, and how I got into this world, so to speak. But writing, I think it was one of the things that helped me the most to know myself. I think that my whole path and all this and these things began with writing. I was 15 years old, I had a notebook, I still have it, I filled it completely. Here, One day I will show you. I was 15 years old and the notebook was fed up with many things. I was going through a moment of changes in my life and I no longer know how I felt. You don't know the magic that was this moment in which I didn't realize the power I had to assume my space in the world and say my words and say how I felt, without fear that no one would judge me because it was my notebook and no one will read it. You don't know how liberating it was. I recommend it a lot. There is no right or wrong way to do it, and this is the best thing you have to write. It is not rules. You can write any something that you can write very wrong, single word, meaningless phrase, and that's it. While she is expressing whatever it is that you want to be expressing. I was seeing a psychologist a while ago. She is a children's psychologist. Her Instagram account is Mine Hearts if I'm not mistaken, but I love it. I follow her as if I had little brothers or children. It is whatever. I love following her. She is a children's psychologist, but she spoke the other day about a technique. I said this makes sense. I know why writing helps me so much so, because by writing and giving a name to the emotions, you take away their power. When you say, I'm feeling anger, I've lost power, I don't feel so much anger anymore, and Zona Loco says it's worth it, but that doesn't make sense. It makes sense. It's checked psychologically and it's a spoken psychologist, more in the field of children, but he said that it had been proven that when the emotion is said out loud, when you say an emotion that you are feeling, the emotion decreases and loses the power. For example, Evidlundia, if you don't want to say it out loud, if you don't want to tell it to a friend, if you don't want to say it, just in your room write it down, name things for Pello, and you will see how much it helps you lose power, and how much it helps you understand that this is what I was feeling. Maybe it wasn't that big, maybe it doesn't go beyond me, because I give a name to Pello and there it is, there it stays, and as I tell you, I don't want to simplify. I know that sometimes it is very hard to flirt like this, sometimes no matter how hard you try, you feel that it is not going away. I wanted to touch on another topic, which is relationships with anxiety. It is not love relationships and not friendship relationships, relationships with family, because I feel that sometimes when you have anxiety, but the person with whom you have a relationship or a person in your family or a friend does not have anxiety, sometimes it is difficult for the other person to understand, or that you feel understood because you feel that that person does not understand what anxiety is. For example, in the case of my family, sometimes I suffered a lot of frustration because I felt like I didn't understand it. I know that not all families are the same, but explain to them how anxiety feels, try to put it into words because anxiety is very, very ambiguous. People, when you gave them this anxiety, people sometimes don't understand what anxiety is. Explain to them what they are feeling. Try to explain to them a little bit what you are going through. Tell them, I make myself send videos from psychologists, podcasts from psychologists to my family so that they understand a little bit what I am going through. The people who care about you and the people who matter to you will be willing to learn what you are going through to understand you a little more. But you also have to understand that if I am not going through that, it is very difficult for them to understand it. So explain to them they are not guess. They can't guess what you're going through, even though we would love to, even though it would be easier if they just kept in mind that I'm going through this. But sometimes people don't realize, and I don't know, or it's not because they don't love you, it's not because they are bad people, it's not because they don't care. People don't realize that, because they're human. Sometimes it's hard to see beyond the person that's happening in the city, that beating them is a very deep, that is not noticeable on the outside. Then explain to them, because if they do not experience anxiety, it is difficult to understand what you are going through, it is difficult for them to imagine it, it is something that they have never experienced perhaps, and how are they going to imagine it like this? I know that it is not easy. I wanted to know. I know that it is not easy to talk about it. The more you talk about it, the easier it becomes. I tell you this in my experience. But what I can tell you is that many times after talking about it, with someone right, with the right person, correct, with someone who does listen to your light load, when things are stored, when emotions are stored, when things are not said, the noise becomes heavy, the load becomes heavy, everything inside becomes heavy. And that is why I say that it is important to talk about it, and if you can't talk to them, write it. But if you have someone who can listen to you, trust me, if a person loves you and cares about you, they will want nothing more than to understand you and listen to you and know what you are going through. The following for me, they are the lines, especially in the case of friendships. I feel that it is very important, and I do this, that if I am going through a bad time right now and your friend wants to tell you something and so on, you are not a bad person for telling her it's over today. I can't carry this. Saying no to a person at some point doesn't make you a bad person, because it's a bummer if your glass is already too full of worries and someone else puts the worry on you and you don't help them, and what it does is explode. Then they have nothing. It's bad, and it's not selfish to say that today. Don't support me with this. Let me calm down and I'll help you right now. There will be a chance if I just take a second and help you. This is in the case of relationships with anxiety. But beyond all this and beyond the hobbies and the 1,000 activities that helped me with anxiety and the psychologist and being aware of remembering that you are the long one and the thoughts are the soybeans and of stabilizing limits and all these things, I wanted to give as a few reminders. I have to see 6 little points that I wrote down, 6 little points that I write down that I want to talk about as a passerby. Pass this by because there is already talk. Here is a series of reminders regarding anxiety. The first thing is that if you know someone who suffers from anxiety, please don't tell them, calm down. Oh no, calm down. Please don't tell them that. Please don't tell them that it's crazy that they think something like this could happen. No, tell them, it's crazy. Maybe you'll help them more by telling them, hey, everything is fine. Everything is going to be fine. This is my favorite mantra. I do it a lot, with my family and I ask them, everything is fine, and they answer me, yes, okay, everything is fine now. Whoops, they don't know the Betty gives me is a mantra, and I love that you tell me, this is fine. Maybe you can help him more by telling them, look, he's not alone. Help them breathe and tell him, one inside, one outside. You can help them by telling them, I'm with you, because sometimes anxiety can feel alone. You can tell them, hey, you're going to see that if you can handle everything as support, with everything in life, you're going to see how if you can handle this, as it has overcome 100% of the things you've experienced in your life. And something that I love, a question that I love that can help a lot, is if you ask the person who is having anxiety, tell me what happens if everything goes away well. Anxiety makes you think a lot about what happens if everything turns out well. What happens if this doesn't turn out well? Yes, what if this? But when it hits you, it gives you all that, another little button, and you wonder, what if everything turns out well? You start to think and look for reasons, and make an effort to look for reasons why. What would happen? What would life be like? What would that situation that is happening be like if everything turned out well? That's like an antidote, in a way. And I think it can help a lot if you know someone who is struggling with anxiety. If you are struggling with anxiety, I think it will help a lot if you ask them certain types of questions. Obviously, it all depends on the person, but I feel that these are things that have helped me a lot to be told. The next reminder is that you need to fill your glass first before filling someone else's. I always tell them, but it's serious, work on yourself. The rest of the world can wait, because the rest of the world needs you to be good with yourself. You can fill your glass first. It doesn't make you egoista. You can work on your things first. It doesn't make you selfish. The next thing I want to wear, it is very important that you remember that you are not your anxiety. You are not that. You are something much bigger than the battles you fight, and the way you fight your battles is admirable, but you are not your battles. You are something much bigger. You are not anxiety. You are not just one. There, I am anxious. I am anxious. No, you are something much bigger. He wanted. The next reminder is that things get better if you can feel peace and if you can feel calm despite the battles with anxiety. Peace and calm are things that you deserve. You deserve each and every one of the emotions that fill you with flatness, and believe me that if you can achieve them, never believe that because you have anxiety you cannot feel peace and you cannot feel calm, because if you can. And I wanted to finish by saying and remembering something that I said a while ago that a psychologist once told me, but he is a statistician, and I know that sometimes factual things and statistical things help people. They do not seem so much like theories and ideals that are floating around in a corner, but 99% of the negative thoughts that we have do not pass. And another piece of information that I am going to give you is that I am sure that if you are listening to me right now, you will overcome 100% of all the things you have experienced in your life. If you are here to overcome 100% of them, that means that it is overcoming 100% of your life. It is 100% of all the bad things, the battle, the night crying alone, the people who didn't love you, who didn't give you enough, the people who left, the goals you tried to achieve that maybe you didn't achieve the first time. All those things have been overcome. And you are here alive today listening to me. That overcoming 100% of all those things means that the probabilities are in your favor, that I don't care what anxiety comes to say, that it comes with this thought introduced, that it comes with the other one. I can tell you something seriously, because I believe it from the depths of my heart. Whatever it is, what are you going through? You can overcome it like you have done with 100% of everything you have experienced in your life. Believe me, the odds are in your favor. I wanted to end this podcast with that, reminding those who have this that they are not alone, reminding them that there is nothing wrong with talking about the anxiety that comes most. You are doing a favor to break stigma, to break the taboo, remind you that there is nothing wrong with you, that you have a mistake or anything like that. I send you a huge kiss wherever that they are, and I wanted to end this podcast with a reminder that always seems pertinent to me, which is that regardless of whether it was good or not so good, your truth was value never changes, because it has always been, you are, and will be enough. We will listen to each other next Monday, and I will make you ugly, or I will speak to you in the next podcast. See you soon, bye.